Gene, I played golf with your son last week.
My son?
Yeah.
All set, Rick?
Okay. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This act allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Now, time to take attendance. Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Amy Paretsky.
Here.
Millie Milton.
Here.
Ashley Davies.
Here.
Tracy Camerano.
She's trying to get her volume to work.
Oh,
She's here, but she can't get any sound.
okay. I see her on the list here. Okay, we'll mark her as here. Fran Baxter.
Here.
Gene Kennedy.
Here.
Gene Cahill. Haven't seen Gene yet. Rick Leaf is here. John Campbell.
Here.
Jen Tolman. I see Jen, you're muted.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi. Okay. I have a few things to cover on the agenda tonight. First item is to finalize the executive summary and to talk about the feedback we got in terms of what the committee feels are priorities that we ought to bring forward to the select board when we present the plan. You probably saw the final edits to the plan have gone recently to Weston and Sampson, and we're looking to see if we can get those back and tentatively see if we can't schedule a joint meeting with the select board for the 18th of January to present the plan. Lori, have you got any feedback from Jonathan Law about that January 18th date yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, that's going to be our next regularly scheduled meeting. So let's all hold January 18th open, and we'll see what we hear back from Weston Sampson. You all got copies of the executive summary. We did get a few edits to that a couple of weeks ago when we had sent that out after our past meeting. Lori made those changes, distributed those back to the people who submitted the edits. And what you see tonight is the result of those. There were some changes, moving some of the text around, deleting some of the wording that referenced sort of the difference of opinion and softened that tone of the executive summary. And at this point, all of those who submitted their changes did not submit any others. So from my perspective, I think we have a finalized executive summary. Are there any other comments about the executive summary before we plan to include that as the first section? Go ahead, Lori.
Jean did submit some follow-up changes, which were incorporated. So this version that I sent out to you should incorporate everybody's changes.
Okay.
More or less, because some people wanted different language for the same sentences. So it ended up being a blended affair.
Okay. So at this
Rick, I have
point,
a
are there
few
any
when there's
are there any
time.
questions or comments about the executive summary, if we consider it finalized? Go ahead, John.
So, with all due respect to those who edited it, I did not submit any back because what I read was Jean and Amy, I think, were leading that.
Yeah.
But I have a few things. There are some just grammatical and look, and some about reorganizing the paragraphs, if you'll give me just a minute. So I'm looking at it now, paragraph 1. It's not a big deal, but the first sentence is kind of repetitive. So I also wondered whether you wanted to say outlines a strategy, or that the plan outlines potential strategies in plural, or anything to that effect. Because it's really a number of strategies, is it not? Maybe you're trying to use the word strategy as an overall thing.
Yeah, I could go either way. I don't have an issue with making that particular change. Is there anyone? Not
Fair
hearing
enough.
anything to that, so we could say outlines potential strategies.
Okay, fair enough. My next comment is in the ensuing 3 paragraphs where you describe each scenario. I don't know if this is the exact look that you would have, but a suggestion would be you start each with scenario 1, for instance, and a colon, and then a descriptive sentence. I would bold that whole thing from scenario 1 to the period at the end of that sentence. And then I would do it for the subsequent scenario 2 and 3 paragraphs. In this, it's a little bit grammatical, but in scenario 1, colon, you list the area and end it with a period. In scenario 2, you begin, the area on Main Street bordering the Assabet Valley is currently used by Harvey Corp. And I think you're trying to say it's not really a complete sentence so much as it's a description. I feel like you would add the word that. The area on Main Street bordering the Assabet River, that is currently used by Harvey Corp.
Or you just, I mean, to make it consistent with the other scenarios, you say the area on Main Street bordering the Assabet River, currently used.
Comma, fine as well. Right.
Yeah.
The word is out of place unless it's prefaced by that or taken out altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe you're right. Comma instead of the word is would affect the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in scenario 3, the same thing. The area south of Main Street, comma, bordered by South Street to the east, Gale Street to the south, and the town common to the west.
Yeah. Okay.
My next comment is that when you read through, you get to page 2, the last 2 paragraphs. Paragraph 4 on page 2 relates back to the 3 scenarios that were just described and gives an overview of those, and that more data is provided. And the paragraph that follows that describes in general our comments about the plan meeting what the consultants did, and that we're not expected to do it all at the same time. It's good text, but it seems like to me it would flow from the first 3 paragraphs describing the scenarios. You would then follow with, on page 2, paragraphs 4 and 5. Then the other paragraphs each describe a particular area or priority goal, which was one of the other assignments we had to give our top 6, so to speak, and I'm sure we're going to discuss that. But I would think you would want the summary to reflect what those top ones are if we reach consensus on that. For instance, right now on page 1, the 4th paragraph discusses the traffic analysis. It seems out of place, and it's almost an afterthought because it did not result in our desire to change anything about Route 20. It was a discussion point, but it isn't one of our recommendations. Whereas there's a paragraph recommending zoning changes. There's a paragraph recommending the economic development staff position. There's a paragraph recommending underground utilities. There's a paragraph recommending housing. There's a paragraph recommending traditional New England feel. And so it's almost like those should flow in the order of priority that we reach tonight,
Um,
perhaps? So am I
well-
making sense? This just seems to be out of place in the way the paragraphs are.
The way I read the executive summary is the first page kind of goes into the various topics that are covered in the plan. So the traffic analysis is an entire chapter. So I think it's important to include it. So
I think maybe to deal with what John is pointing out and what I felt as well and didn't have time to really tackle it is maybe just headers or section separators. It's just so much text and it just looks like it all just goes together, and it would be great just to, scenarios, traffic study, or just kind of like some headers.
Yep.
I think would probably accomplish that. It's tackling a lot of different issues, but they're just kind of all blended into this one.
Yeah, I think, just trying to reconcile, I think the idea was in the first couple of pages to basically sort of bring out kind of what's in the plan. So the paragraphs kind of flow between the scenarios, which are the most important things that are in the plan, and some other studies and information that was compiled. And then it kind of tries to get into, some ideas about how to go about, working, with the plan. It may be difficult trying to think about what kind of a header you could put on each one of these paragraphs that would be fairly descriptive.
Well, if you
I would
if you
think,
took a
like that paragraph that John, you just mentioned, that fourth paragraph on the second page, it talks about the chapters, chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 7. So I can see that moving to the first page. But then I think, the traffic analysis, that's chapter 4. So that belongs on the first page. And then, like, this plan sets forth the vision, that should be after that, in my opinion.
So that would kind of work toward what I suggested. If that fourth paragraph, page 2, was moved to be after the paragraph describing scenario 3, and the traffic analysis follows that. So as you say, you're describing the different chapters, and that flows, and then you could then basically plug those 2 paragraphs in ahead of what's next. It just struck me that what's next is somewhat random, because the first thing talked about is underground utilities, which I think is an awesome idea, but it's I don't know, it was the number one thing that you wanted to put there. And it's just, I was looking for a way to flow from the most important things down.
I think the reason the underground utilities in there is because it seems like it's going to be an obvious question that we wanted to at least get some information out about to the select board prior to them reading through the whole plan to find that in there. It was mentioned at a number of the public meetings. So
Well, let's say,
we just
sorry
want to
to
bring it
interrupt,
out.
let's say you're right that you leave it there. I wondered then about 2 things in the paragraph about underground utilities. It states the plan, paraphrasing, recommends that this work be deferred until major Route 20 construction is needed. Did the plan say that?
It does. So it pretty much says that because Mass DOT, so the sidewalks are in good shape. So because it's a huge expense and the utilities would go under the sidewalks, it is unlikely that Mass DOT will allow, because remember, they own the right of way. So it's unlikely that they would allow the power lines to go under the sidewalks if the sidewalks don't have to be redone at this time. So the time to do undergrounding of the utilities is when the sidewalks are in such a state that they need to be redone anyway.
Is there precedent for that you've heard of in
Yeah.
other towns?
Yeah, that's a regular conversation that we have with regards to any roadway. So I know in Millbury, when I was doing the downtown revitalization work, that is when we addressed all of the issues with the utilities. So we ended up doing a major sewer line replacement project because the road was already going to be disturbed in order to accommodate the new drainage infrastructure. And also the gas lines were replaced at that time too. Because the last thing you want is to dig into a brand new roadway. So we actually, I believe it's a regulation that says that you can't dig into a newly paved roadway for a period of 5 years.
Thanks for explaining. I have one other grammatical change, and I'm willing to stand down after that. It is the paragraph that's currently paragraph 2 on page 2. It reads, the plan recommends that the town consider zoning changes to diversify the types of uses allowed and an increase in overall density. So the grammar doesn't work. I think you would strike the word and the word in. So it would read zoning changes to diversify the types of uses allowed and increase overall density, so as to create a more successful downtown.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, John.
A quick question that I asked a couple times, because I looked through what's allowed downtown and it says increased uses allowed. And I was just wondering if they gave any examples of uses that aren't allowed in the downtown that they'd want to add. When I went through our zoning chart, I couldn't find any.
You mean like uses in occupancy or business?
I thought it was uses like business uses, like say a restaurant or a, brewery or, I know they mentioned like luggage stores and, everything they had mentioned we do already allow down there. So I was just curious.
I think, I'm sorry, I think it's because what we're now defining as downtown overlaps different zones. It's not just what our DB is now.
Right.
So if we want to allow something in GR that isn't allowed, maybe that's what they were referring to.
Yeah, but that's really, right now we're discussing the executive summary, so that's more of a comment about the plan itself.
It was in the executive summary. It said to add uses. I was just curious what uses we're adding. Not that I care either way, but I asked them a couple times and I never got an answer. So I was just curious.
I think they only reiterated what's in the zoning bylaw. They didn't do any type of analysis. They didn't give any examples from other communities. So I think it sort of fails on that point. So I think we're on our own going forward in terms of diversity of uses, densities, etc.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of Amy?
Yeah.
So Amy, are you saying that sentence is kind of redundant, that, we really,
I'm not sure if it's redundant, but the way it was in there, I was just wondering what uses we needed to add. Being on the planning board, I was just curious, because I saw that the items that they talked about, luggage stores and stuff, and clothing is already all allowed. So I was just curious. Yeah, so I guess it's not that it's redundant, but it's just confusing to me because I don't know. It doesn't tell me what they're thinking of adding. It's just a sentence that doesn't mean anything if there's no suggestions on what to add.
Hmm.
I think you can just be creative and say, yeah, we can add more uses. Let's consider what they could be.
And let's also, on that point, as we work with Weston and Sampson to put the presentation together for the select board, to have them maybe give some examples, above and beyond what they may have said in the plan.
Yep, I asked
Clarify
it
that
twice
also.
in my comments that I sent to them. I had asked them what uses they were considering, but I didn't get an answer.
All right, we'll follow up on that again. Okay, other comments or questions about the executive summary? So we'll make these changes.
Yeah, I'm still seeing lots of grammatical things, but as John said, I don't know what to do about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear you, Ashley. What did you say? You're still seeing what?
I'm still seeing quite a few grammatical things and spacing issues and things like that. I don't know. It doesn't seem like we have time to address those types of things any longer.
If they're grammatical errors, just track the changes in the text and email it back to me.
Okay.
As long as it's not changing the intent, I
Yeah,
assume that everybody's going to be okay with addressing grammatical issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. You know,
And I thought I
we-
was the grammar guru, so maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
My mother would be disappointed.
Sometimes when you look at a document for too long, you stop seeing the details. You know what I mean? You sometimes just need other eyes.
Yes, that's why I have Michelle proofread my work.
Okay, well, let's just keep in mind as a committee, that we did send this information out for review a few weeks ago, asked for comments. We got a few. We are trying to shoot for, if we can, a mid-January presentation to select board. So we need to get any changes for this that you might have, grammatical changes, back to Lori fairly quickly so we can get these in here and make sure we have the right things, the first section of the plan. Do that fairly quickly in the next few days.
So the deadline is Wednesday. So if you don't submit changes to me by Wednesday, you are out of luck. It's final.
Okay. We have something to go on there. Okay. Thanks for those comments. We'll make those changes. Laura will get that in there. And then this, with the last changes we talked about tonight, and any of the grammatical changes people send in, we'll make those changes and then send that to Weston and Sampson for inclusion as the first section of the report. So let's talk about what people sent back in terms of their top priorities. Lori sent that back out with kind of a list of what came back in the votes kind of thing. There's no doubt it seemed like if you take a look at improve the aesthetics of the downtown through public and private actions, and also, the first one under mid-level short-term priorities, develop and implement a multi-year, multi-phase effort to improve public infrastructure downtown, including streetscape, which also got votes. Those two kind of things kind of flow together. So I think it's pretty clear, and I know we've discussed this before, that I think the committee feels that anything the town can start to do to improve the look and feel of what we've got is something that we ought to be, pushing for and recommending. As a matter of fact, Lori, when we get done with this part of the agenda, is going to be discussing with us some ideas she has to do some of that might have some state grant funding behind it. But it seems like between, the short-term objective number 5 and short-term objective number 8, those two things, got quite a few votes, from people kind of thing. So it seems like there's some consensus around anything we can do to improve the look and feel of what we currently have is something we ought to try and move on as best we can, kind of thing. And then, what got the next most votes was to seriously consider bringing in this economic development, position to sort of lead the charge as to whatever could happen going forward with this. That got the second most votes from the people who had submitted their input. And then zoning and reuse of the town hall, came in as the next three. So those next two sort of tied for number 3. So I'd just be interested in getting, some feedback from people as to what they see with this. Does that seem to make sense when an opportunity here when we present this plan to the select board is to highlight these areas as items that the committee feels the town ought to be spending some time on sooner than later, kind of thing. Does this seem to make sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
Rick, it seems like the top one, improve the aesthetics of downtown, is, I know it's repeating the words that were in the plan, but it's so general. So whether the words are added at the presentation or we add them ourselves, I wonder if that you talked about combining it with signage and streetscape, and maybe it just needs to speak specifically to things that we believe could happen.
I mean, we can amplify that by talking about, it's kind of interesting that we talked about aesthetics of the downtown, and yet one of the things that got some votes, but not quite as many, was the one on building facade and signage improvement, which you could, to a certain extent, could be rolled into, a multi-year, multi-phase effort to include public infrastructure downtown, including the streetscape. Although I guess public infrastructure would be more the streets and the sidewalks and plantings and things like that. Improve the aesthetics of the downtown through public and private actions, might tie into the building facade and signage improvement program.
Mm-hmm.
Which could be given as an example of something that, could be reconsidered as part of improving the aesthetics, as well as things we can do with street trees and planting and signage and things like that. Is there anything that people do not see here in terms of short-term priorities they feel, that we ought to be bringing forward, or are we basically going to be kind of highlighting during the presentation, the things that we've got listed as top short-term priorities?
No, just for me, I don't know if others did it. I didn't pick like objective 5 in like all of them. I would say like not sure about actions 1 or 2, but like 3 to 7, or even like, I don't know how everybody else voted. I was just curious. I didn't feel that all of the objectives, all of the actions under it could be done right away, but some of them could be done and others would have to wait longer.
Right.
Like even in short-term objective number 6, I voted for that, but I voted to add 10% of affordable housing. It's like inclusionary housing. We used to have it in town to make sure we don't go below our 10%. But I didn't pick the whole objective. I thought certain aspects of it. I didn't know
Yeah, just as the person who was trying to compile this,
if
I took some liberties because most of you did it the same exact way, and then a couple of you didn't. And so I was trying to compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. So a couple of you identified, well, a couple of you provided me with brand new objectives that don't appear in the plan. And so I listed those on the bottom. I think there were 3 of you who did that. Then a couple of you only gave me a couple of objectives or priorities that were in the plan, and that was it. And then some of you gave me more than 6. So a couple of you gave me 7. So the people who gave me tasks instead of objectives, like Amy, I think you gave me, or a couple of you gave me like 3 tasks under the same objective. So I just ended up putting you in the objective category because it was kind of a struggle. But the assignment was to go through the objectives and pick the ones that were your top 6. So where people ended up doing different things, then clearly you were the only person who voted that way. So it wasn't a top vote getter anyway.
I thought you had said to pick an action or an objective. So I went through and I picked a couple, mostly actions I picked underneath objectives.
Well, now you know that I put the objective that the actions went with.
So I might have given 3 votes to some of them because I picked the different actions.
I think I might have given you 2 votes in the same objective because you did that. So I didn't give you all 3, I gave you 2.
I did the same thing. I wasn't clear on that. I mean, some of them, it was just the objective, but some the tasks, individual tasks.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I
sorry that the instructions weren't clear.
I just thought underneath the objective, some of them would be really expensive to do where others were easier to do. So they weren't like all or none, you know.
I think what we were trying to do is trying to find points of consensus, because there were, at the last meeting, there were a lot of people saying, well, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like this. So I think the concern was going to the Board of Selectmen with everybody just saying what they didn't like and nobody saying what they liked. So the point was to try and figure out where, if there was any consensus, it revolved around. And then, you know, within the committee itself, there can be more specific direction.
Mhm.
So if we're working on improve the aesthetics of downtown Northborough through public and private actions, so then through conversation, we can decide which task under that objective is going to be the priority that's going to be worked on in year 1 or whatever.
Sounds good.
Rick, I know Julianne's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I
Okay,
was
go ahead,
I was
Julianne.
just wondering if you could share on your screen that final list, because I can't find it in my email.
Sure, let me find it.
Oh, that'd be so helpful. Thank you.
Just bear with me a minute. Okay, so let me share. So here we go. So the top vote getters were improve the aesthetics of downtown Northborough through public and private action. So that got 8 votes. The similar objective that Rick was talking about got 5 votes. So then the next highest vote getter was hire an experienced downtown manager to lead the Northborough's revitalization effort. So that got 7 votes. And then there were 2 that were tied with 6 votes. Review the town zoning regulations to allow for higher density mixed use development in the greater downtown area. And pursue adaptive reuse of the former town hall building at 4 West Main Street to become a new anchor for downtown. So with that one, I'm going to explain that there was another similar objective that talked about the fire station that also got 4 votes. And then there was, let's see, There was another one. Well, I suppose that's it. So that one is similar. So it was kind of, these two are together. And then if you want to see the new ones that people added, those are listed at the end. Pursue opportunities to connect the town common with Assabet Park by creating additional open space for walking connectivity and adding additional parking. Connect neighborhoods to downtown by expanding the sidewalk network. Alternative housing. Work towards cleaning up the Assabet River and other bodies of water. Sign bylaw for consistency and enforce current and future sign bylaws, and add possibilities for White Cliffs into discussion of downtown revitalization. So I wasn't quite sure. Do people want these added to the plan itself? Because they don't currently appear in the plan.
No, I don't think that would be helpful at all. I mean, I think they're great options, but I think that those would be more appropriate as we go through the plan. Some of them are really specific and some of them are vague. So I think you're opening up a can of worms by trying to add those in. And I do think that some of them are already covered in the overall larger context of the plan.
Yeah, I think, short-term objective 8 that got 5 votes about to develop and implement a multi-year, multi-phase effort to improve public infrastructure downtown, including the streetscape, sort of gets at maybe those first couple of comments, general comments that weren't in the plan about sidewalks. Connecting, Assabet Park to the common and doing a better job of connectivity between neighborhoods in the downtown could be, rolled into something that would be looked at in terms of multi-year, multi-phase effort to improve public infrastructure.
Right.
It might be just on the edges of downtown, but there's a connectivity between the downtown and those areas, and sidewalks is definitely going to be something that's going to be part of improving public infrastructure anywhere in the downtown. So those two, I think, fit a little bit, into, even though they're not called out specifically in the plan, they fit short-term, whatever it is, short-term objective number 8.
Yeah.
So when we talk about infrastructure, we can mention that as part of this, the town ought to be considering sidewalks and connectivity to neighborhoods and the possibility of improving the access between Assabet Park and the common are all things that our town could consider in the short term.
And I think the one with the sign facade and the signs also falls into the, improve the aesthetics. So I think they're sort of, how do you improve the aesthetics? Well, you make consistency in your design, or you make rules and regulations. So I think those fall under that.
Yeah. We could roll some of these together a little bit. But I'm not hearing any concerns or objections to the ones that got the most votes. It seems like we ought to be emphasizing this whole idea of aesthetics and infrastructure, public and private, reinforcing that, towns have been successful doing this, have a staff person dedicated to this kind of work. And then, there's going to have to be some emphasis looking at the zoning one way or another to decide how we want to do that. That comes out in the executive summary also. When we talk about the town hall, is undergoing, the whole town office thing is undergoing current study. And the plan does, the executive summary does call out the fact that this 4 West Main Street building could play a significant part in the revitalization of that Blake Street area. So the town needs to give serious consideration as to what it wants to do with that. And then it is a piece of property the town now currently owns, and for the most part is vacant. So that rises up a little bit. The fire station could be rolled into that, but the fire station isn't going to be vacant for a couple of years at least. Although the fire station, I think, the plan outlines some good ideas about the fire station. But that necessarily, nothing's going to happen to that a little bit longer down the road. But the town hall, could be something that the town could make some decisions on in calendar year 2024.
Mm-hmm.
I think they will make some decisions with that. And so it's important, I think, to emphasize that the plan does talk quite a bit about this Lake Street area. The town hall plays an important part in that. So that just needs to be kept, consideration needs to be kept as to how that plays into this. So it makes sense to me. That's a definite short-term item that needs to be emphasized. So I could see, leaning on these top 3 vote getters. There are 4 items, but the things that got 8766 votes roll in some things below that play into them. And as we make the presentation, just bring out these things as areas that the committee feels strongly the town ought to consider making some headway on. That seem reasonable, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Does. The one objective that didn't get too many votes was to create a downtown management organization to plan, organize, and coordinate downtown revitalization activities and create key partnerships.
Yep.
Could we move that up and sort of link it with the hiring a downtown manager?
Yeah, we could do that.
My thinking is, for whatever reason, the selectmen are going to make that decision on a new staff person, probably beyond the planning aspect. There'll be financial considerations, et cetera. But a downtown management organization is essentially a committee to implement the downtown revitalization plan, just as we are a committee to implement the 2020 master plan. And that is something organizationally that selectmen can discuss and can implement fairly quickly. And we will then have a mechanism to focus on downtown, which I think is what's been lacking, all these years. There's no one entity responsible for improving downtown. So if we could link that with the staff person, if the staff person, if they decide not to have an additional staff person, well, at least we have a downtown management group that can take the ball and start moving with it.
Yeah, I agree that these should be linked together. I guess my feeling, though, is that every one of these committees needs a staff liaison. And for the most part, any of the work that gets generated out of this falls back on the staff to do. So I think it'd be important to recognize that if the town wanted to create a downtown management organization, it would really be important to have this economic development coordinator or downtown manager in place to be the staff liaison, to work with this committee and every day do the work to make some of these things happen. To expect that a citizen committee is going to effectively be able to make significant progress in this without some staff support isn't going to work. And I think one of the things we discussed before was there really isn't the staff capacity right now to do this. So I agree, Gene, these things are linked.
Mm-hmm.
But I would emphasize that to make it really work, there needs to be a staff position that heads up or acts as a staff support for that committee. And
I'd agree with that.
The committee wants to be happen. So
I mean, I think that one is short term, which is to get the downtown manager. The second one is medium term, which is then to develop a committee. I think they do make sense in that order.
yeah, I agree. But we can definitely, as we discuss the downtown manager recommendation, we can link it with, the downtown management organization as something that this person could lead and use as a sounding board and a place to generate ideas and make this happen. So yeah, they definitely go together.
Yep.
Okay, good comment. Anything else? Okay, well, we'll use this as a guide. My sense, Lori, as we head towards scheduling this joint meeting with the select board, is probably you and I and Julianne are going to have some advanced meeting with Jonathan and just run through how this presentation is going to work, who's going to do what, who's going to lead it, and how we roll in some of this into the presentation. So I see it kind of being a combination of, some of the discussion being led by the MPIC and some of the discussion being led by the consultant. We have to figure out how that all kind of flows together. And then obviously there'll be a lot of questions that need to be answered. So, we used to do this in the master plan. We had these, preliminary meetings between, you and I and Ashley and the consultants, kind of thing. So we should think about sometime, once we know what date we're shooting at, setting up an organizational meeting to sort of think our way through this.
I think we should do that about a week in advance of our meeting, because they're going to need time to prepare the presentation. So I think it'd probably be helpful to have that meeting before they've ironed out the specifics of their slides.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just to sort of recap here, we've got some changes that were brought up tonight to the executive summary. A couple of people indicated they'd like to submit some more changes. Those need to be into Lori by Wednesday next week so we can finalize the executive summary. Waiting on Weston Sampson to confirm a date when they could be available to do a presentation to the select board. I would like the final plan to be done and in the select board's hands at least a week before whatever this meeting is going to be, so they have a chance to read through it. And then Lori and Julianne and I will meet in advance of that meeting with the consultants, Weston Sampson, and sort of put the strategy together for what this presentation is going to look like. But one of the open items right now is the actual date we're going to do this. But for now, let's hold open the 18th. That's on January 18th as our next regularly scheduled meeting date. We'll see if we can make it happen for that date. If we can't, then we'll have to start communicating as to getting some consensus around other dates that might work. But we're pretty close here to making this presentation at this point. I just want to thank everybody. I mean, we put a lot of work into this, got a lot of different opinions about it. I think that what we're going to end up with is going to be useful to at least put in front of town government the fact that the town is very interested in doing something about this. Exactly what happens will be determined by a lot of external and internal factors, but by producing the plan and having a general idea of what might be possible, we're furthering what the town told us when the master plan was done, that there's a significant interest in making improvements to our downtown area. And this is the next step in trying to move that forward. Once again, where this all ends up down the road will be dependent on a lot of different factors. But the absence of doing what we've done, I don't think we'd be in a position to sit before the select board and say, let's keep moving this thing forward, because that's what a lot of people in town want to see happen. So to that extent, I think we made some good progress in the past year with this. And I think we've continually meet the objective of the master plan, which is to represent the town's interest in trying to improve and revitalize the downtown. So once again, thank you everybody for everything you've done and submitted and your ideas and stuff like that. I think we're moving in the right direction. Where we end up, we'll see over time, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So once again, thanks everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Meg.
Yeah, for
You
leading the
guys have
charge.
done the heavy lifting, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for keeping this moving.
Thank you.
Okay, so next
Rick, you
item on
have
the
a hand
agenda.
up.
Jen has a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Jen. Go ahead.
You're
Sorry,
muted.
I muted.
I just wanted to say something. I don't think it belongs in the plan, but just for FYI, the Cultural Council is raising money to do a sculpture for downtown and a mural again for coming 2024. And we're also planning another artsy event for the spring. So it probably doesn't belong in the plan, but I just wanted everyone to know that in the interest of trying to become a cultural district where we can get more money from the state, we are planning some kind of cool things for the spring. So hopefully it'll give a little juice to downtown as well.
Well,
And
that'd
if
be
anyone
great.
has any ideas that the Cultural Council can kind of implement, please feel free to reach out and we'll try to, do that. But we are going to start raising money for that. So that's it.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And Julian had mentioned to us that she'd like to get the Cultural Council on one of our agendas coming up. So if we can't do it at the January meeting, we'll try and do it at the February meeting. So you guys can come in and tell us what you're thinking about, and that'll be a great discussion. So sooner than later, we'll have the Cultural Council come before the MPIC also. That'll be a good thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the next agenda item has to do with some ideas that Lori has about downtown improvement. It sort of plays into some of the things we've talked about here. She mentioned to me that there's a state grant program we could apply for to get funding for this, and she has a lot of ideas about what might happen. So I asked her to just sort of give us an overview of what she's thinking about, what she's done in Millbury about this, and just get a general idea of what's happening here, and we can feed back to that and see what it would take to move forward, because this definitely fits into first the one thing that got the most votes, which was improve the aesthetics and the infrastructure downtown. So go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Rick. So there is an MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant, that's going to be due the first week of June. And this is a grant program that was a very big funder of my downtown revitalization effort in the town of Millbury. So I thought that it would be a good program that we could apply for the engineering only for Blake Street. So I thought that it might be interesting for me to share with you the street view of the town of Millbury so that you can see the downtown revitalization project there. And I'd be interested in getting your feedback on certain design elements. So the design of the downtown in Millbury was partly designed to appeal to this particular grant program. So this grant program is really into funding climate change mitigation. They also are particularly concerned with flood remediation. And in the town of Millbury, the downtown, the Blackstone River flows through the downtown, and there have been flooding issues within the downtown itself. So this was a particularly good fit for the town of Millbury. There would be some adaptations for the town of Northborough because, of course, it's a different community with different issues. But there are some particular design elements that I was thinking that would fit very well in the town of Northborough. And I wanted you to see what they look like in the town of Millbury so that you could kind of give me some feedback on whether or not you think this is something that you would like to see in Northborough. So I'm going to share my screen. And luckily, I just realized that the street view has been updated as of a few months ago. So this is a view. So this is the phase 2 downtown revitalization project. So this is the project that was fully engineered when I was working for the town of Millbury. And I ended up leaving when the construction bids arrived. So I think it was like 2 days after my departure that the construction bids came in. So I wrote all of the grant applications for this phase 2 project and was facilitating the design process. So this is Elm Street. So this project was constructed by J.H. Lynch. This is actually the town hall in Millbury, and across the street is the brand new fire station. The facade is now virtually complete, but this video was taken probably in, actually it says June of 2023, so it was a few months ago. So this is a little pocket park that was constructed as part of this project. There are pedestrian scale lights. So these are decorative LED lights that are 12 feet tall. All of the sidewalks, of course, are concrete. And then they have porous paver, decorative edging. So underneath these pavers are perforated pipes. So when it rains, the sidewalks are pitched in such a way that the water flows off of the sidewalk into these porous pavers, which then goes into the perforated pipe under the sidewalk, and then empties into rain gardens that are located within these vegetated bump outs. So here is an example of a rain garden. So you'll see that there is a gap in the granite curb that's filled with stone. So this is engineered soil underneath the mulch. So the rain, the stormwater infiltrates into this rain garden, and then on the surface are pretty flowers. So this is something that the MVP program really likes, because of course, instead of doing your typical engineered system of catch basins that then go into detention basins, or they go directly into a river or stream, this enables the storm water to be infiltrated on site directly into the ground. So this is an idea that I was thinking of for the Blake Street area. But I want to continue down the street and show you some of the other design elements. So this right here is a seating wall. So people can sit there. These are porous pavers. Once again, decorative. And again, the water falls onto the pavers and infiltrates directly into the ground, instead of the traditional way, which would be that the pavers are set in concrete, and then they ultimately go into the roadway, and then they go into catch basins, and then into the river or stream or catch basin. So as you go down further down the street, you can see that there are these vegetated bump outs. This isn't a complete project, so I'm going to continue down the street so you can see one that is. So you can see that these bump outs are placed in locations where on-street parking is not allowed, because you cannot have parking spaces that abut a crosswalk. So normally in the downtown, you would see that this would be striping, which would tell people that you can't park there. And then you'd have the crosswalk. But in this scenario, instead of putting striping on asphalt, you're doing these landscape bump outs, which provide an opportunity for street trees. They also provide an opportunity for these pedestrian scale streetlights. And you have all of these plantings. So you're greening the landscape by doing this. Continue down the street. So now you get into the phase 1 project. So this project was completed a year before. So it's had time to kind of grow in a bit. So of course you have the cement sidewalks, once again, you have the porous paver, decorative edge. You have, it's a fully complete streets. We did actually get a complete streets grant for this project. So we're including all of the elements that the Complete Streets program likes. This asphalt was actually replaced, so now it's a concrete apron. So it looks even better than it does in this picture. And then I wanted to bring you further down. So this is another design element. So the idea was to narrow the intersection because we were trying to dissuade truck traffic to go from going through the downtown by making the intersection narrower. And we were also trying to encourage crossing. So we wanted more pedestrian activity than we had previously. So once again, we have a seating wall, we have porous pavers, and this is actually our common in the town of Millbury. And then across the street is the little common. So this used to be a no man's land. It used to be ugly beyond belief. And it was converted into a really nice, in my opinion, pedestrian plaza. So this is an electronic message center, just like the Lions Club, but of course it's a more modern, updated version than the sign that is currently at the corner of Blake and Route 20. And they ended up doing a decorative, historic house for the sign to kind of try and make it blend in a little bit more. And then the Millbury Redevelopment Authority did a fundraising campaign for this 4-dial clock.
Love it.
I believe that cost about $25,000. And you can see that there's a huge amount of planting. So these are my pots that I did. This was a fundraiser. So you can see that the pots on the bridge on Church Street are the start of the Northborough pot program. Unfortunately, these cars are not well placed, but there are circular benches that go along this pocket park, and it's full of landscaping. So then they have, so this used to be a very large kind of parking lot. So the sidewalk used to be very, very narrow. It was like a 5-foot sidewalk originally. So what we did is we reconfigured the sidewalk. So we expanded it significantly. And that enabled us to do these little planter boxes for the trees, and also, oops. Oh, I hate when that happens. Let's see if I can go back there. So it enabled us to be able to fit picnic tables. So right across the street, you have Calabria Restaurant. So they have outdoor seating. This is a very nice Italian restaurant. And then around the corner, so Amy, this is for you. This is a little cupcake place that I told you I love the little sign that they have. They have a blade sign that I think is really cute, but I don't want to get distracted.
Yeah.
So this is an idea of what can be done on Blake Street if you expand the sidewalk. So they have awnings. This is something we've been talking about with design review. And they have the sign written in this awning itself, in the skirt of the awning. So then across the street, we have, this is low-income housing owned by the Housing Authority. So then some other design elements that we included, we got some funding for a bike rack in the downtown area. There is actually a WRTA bus that goes through the town center. So we have a bus shelter. It doesn't, can't really see it there, but there is a bus shelter there. And these little design elements, the reason why I wanted to show you the common is I wanted to show you what that little park could look like. Not to say that it should look like Milbury's Common, I'm not saying that. But this right here is a rain garden. So it is actually connected. Once again, you have these porous pavers. You have perforated pipe under these porous pavers. And the stormwater is actually directed into this rain garden right here. So it infiltrates into the ground. Once again, you have a seating wall. You have another seating wall over here, and the proof is in the pudding. You actually have people sitting on the seating wall. Imagine that, pedestrians. So you have people sitting on the seating wall enjoying it, and then there are various benches throughout. So if we were to move from, does anybody have any questions about what you're seeing here? No? Okay, so let's move to oh, actually, I'm going to put in for West Main. Make sure I end up in the right spot. And then I'm going to take my little man. I'm going to pop him right here. Okay, so we've arrived in Northborough. Not exactly where I wanted to be, but close enough. So you already have some of those design elements. They were put in by Mass Highway when they redid Route 20. So you can see you get a little bump out right here. And then you have this little pocket park right here. So one of the things that we did with the common is we said, you can't remove any of the existing trees. Those must stay. So your design has to work around those trees, and you have to ensure that you don't destroy the root systems because we want to keep those trees. So that can be done here too. One thing that I would like to do is, and we talked about this, is making Blake Street one way throughout its entire length. So the beauty of doing that is that then you can narrow the roadway. So I use my little GIS tool to measure the width of Blake Street. At its narrowest point, Blake Street is 22 feet. So that's pretty much here. And then as you go down the street, it widens to 28 feet. So there really is an opportunity to narrow the roadway. One of the things that I would like to do with this little pocket park is make it bigger. Because if we narrow the roadway and make it one way, then we don't necessarily need these parking spaces right here. So these could be incorporated into the open space. But certainly I know, and you folks know, that parking is limited now. So I would not recommend that we go forward with the Weston and Sampson suggestion of making all of this area open space, because we need the parking in order to occupy this building, whether it's the town hall or whether it's not the town hall, we still need parking. We don't have the parking garage I don't really see that that would happen anytime soon. In this location right here, there is the potential to add some trees. Also in this little pocket park here, I'd like to replace this. I think what they were going for was a seating wall. But I would be nervous about sitting here. I think it could be rebuilt and made more comfortable, kind of like the seating walls that I showed you in Millbury. And these pavers here look like they've seen some better days. So this area could be enhanced and made better. And certainly it looks over here like there's some sort of drainage problem. So there is the potential that we could do some rain gardens here. Not only do they look beautiful, but they also deal with stormwater issues. So moving right along, I know that the sidewalk has been redone in asphalt, but it kind of blends in. So there isn't much of a berm, not really much of a separation between the street and the sidewalk. So what I was thinking of is taking up and widening the asphalt sidewalk. So we would do vertical granite curb and concrete sidewalks instead. I would like to do further, as we get further down here, we have this C. I measured this on the GIS. It's approximately 150 feet wide. That's crazy in my opinion. Your typical driveway entrance is only about 50 feet wide. Even that is huge. It's could be a lot smaller than that, but we could probably do a couple of entrances because of course, this is the municipal parking lot. This is publicly owned. And then there is a small amount of pavement that's associated with this building. And then this parcel is privately owned. One of the great things about the MVP grant is if you can get an agreement from private property owners, then you can use grant money to design and actually make physical improvements to their properties. So they need to sign off on it. So I would like to approach these property owners to see if they would be open to having their parking lots reconfigured. I think that there doesn't need to be this amount of pavement. I think it would look a lot better if the pavement were, some of the pavement were taken up and replaced by landscaping. Now, the MVP grants would find that attractive because you're infiltrating groundwater, you're infiltrating surface water into the ground. So you're minimizing the impervious surface. So we would go from the sea of asphalt to something less than that. So I would like to extend I would want to keep all of these trees. And I would like to extend this median strip. Ideally, I'd like to have a sidewalk along this side of the street. And I'd like to have a combination of parallel parking and then in this area, diagonal parking, because we're changing a two-way to a one-way. It would make sense to do diagonal parking instead of what currently exists. Over on this side of the street, I'd like to do decorative streetlights. Right now, of course, we already have streetlights on these telephone poles. These would be kind of like what you saw in Millbury, the 12-foot tall pedestrian scale streetlights. And once again, slightly wider sidewalk. It wouldn't be as necessary to do that where you have residential uses. It's more important to have the wider sidewalk where you have commercial uses. Because it provides, like I said, the opportunity for the street trees where obviously you're not going to get much in the way of street tree here without doing some sort of bump out. So I actually am going to flip over to my notes that I put on another screen just so I can read through there. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Talked about narrowing the driveway. Instead of doing the 150-foot egress, you'd narrow it to 26 feet wide. It would be a shared egress. Or we could do two 26-foot wide entrances that would be shared by all three users. Let's see. Expand the width of the landscape buffer, like I said, put in sidewalk. Oh, reposition the dumpster. So there's a dumpster shown. I'd like to relocate and remove the clothing boxes if they're still there. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the other view. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Is this something, are these design ideas something that you'd be interested in or no?
I mean,
I think
I
very
think
much
it
so.
would look beautiful or gorgeous if you could do those things. Are you talking about doing this whether it's a one-way or a two-way? Either way?
Well, you wouldn't be able to do as much if it's a two-way, just because you're so limited by space. So the right-of-way is relatively narrow. So the town only has jurisdiction over the public right-of-way. So that includes the sidewalks, and that includes the municipal parking lots and that pocket park.
But you're saying that you would do this if it's a two-way, only certain parts of it?
If it's a two-way, then it might be difficult to get that parallel parking in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still do bump outs. They just have to be narrow.
So this really hinges upon whether it goes to a one-way.
Right. It's already partly a one-way.
Exactly.
Right. So it would be consistent. So I would not narrow the roadway further than where it's already narrow. So that street width would stay 22 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So my proposal is to make it a uniform 22 feet instead of what it currently is, which is 22 feet, and then it widens out to 28 feet.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Lori, I have some questions.
Yeah, sure.
So the MVP grant is for, in the case of Millbury, there was flooding issues that kind of argued for the rain garden effect, but we don't have any particularly identified vulnerability in that area. So that's one question. Another is that it's really for adaptation to climate change. Mitigation is more on the level of drawing down carbon and, kind of maybe eliminating heat islands or maybe taking out curbing and hardscape and being able to put in trees. But so that's kind of a concern about the fit of this particular location for the MVP grant. And then I also wanted to say about the area that you identified as a potential place where water is not draining, that looks on the green, the existing green, that looks like it's really compacted soil. That's, I think, where the kids play. So this is a huge gathering spot for middle schoolers, and they're down there just having a gas in that park and probably trampling the grass to death.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's middle school kids that are there, they could certainly enjoy a spiffier looking spot, I think.
I just think that's why the grass has died, not because of a water issue there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the MVP program, so in Millbury, The issue there that I really kind of trumpeted was climate adaptation, so the heat island impacts. There is the low-income housing right there on the corner, which was super helpful for getting that. It is actually an environmental justice area. So that was another feather in the cap, which Northborough doesn't have. But Northborough does have a significant amount of low-income housing in the downtown owned by the housing authority. So I think that that would be helpful. And then also there's, the food bank, there's the various activities that the churches undertake that would be helpful in the application. So I do think that we have some things that we can kind of celebrate to enhance the application. So the focus here would be the same, concentrating on infiltrating stormwater and cleansing it before it's infiltrated or while it's being infiltrated, and greening up the space and reducing the impervious surface. And like I said, I would like to put in as many of those rain gardens as can possibly be accommodated. And it is amazing how they can be built into parking lots. And they look really attractive. So we could even use some porous pavers within the parking lot itself. So we did a project at the high school that involved porous pavers. So half of the parking spaces are particular spaces are asphalt and the other half is porous pavers. Julianne?
So I think what you have thought about and presented to us looks beautiful. But I have a couple of questions. One is, which way would you make it one way?
So I would stick with the current pattern. So right now it's one way going into Blake Street from Route 20. So I would stick with that.
So maybe we should think about that, because that's a difficult way to get in from Route 20, especially when there's a lot of traffic. I wonder if looking at it the other way might be, maybe we'd have to do a traffic, study or something, some kind of analysis to see which way would be easier. I mean, it might be just me, but going into Blake Street from 20, it sounds more difficult than going into Blake Street from Pier Street. But anyway, that's point number one. Point number two is, how do these rain gardens work in really rainy summers? Like, how do you prevent the flowers or the trees from drowning?
So you have to be careful about the plant choices. So there are particular plants that do well in wet conditions and do well in dry conditions. Actually, black-eyed Susans are an example. So you have to go with those options. And if you noticed, most of the plants are built on the berms. So they're not, so where the water settles into the rain garden is stone. So that is the heaviest area of wetness. So the stone helps the water infiltrate into the soil. So then the plants are on the, I'm going to share my screen again so I can describe it. So I'm going to move back to Millbury. So bear with me a minute. I'm going to take my little man and fly him over there. Oh, my man doesn't want to be there for some reason.
I think I'm understanding what you're saying. What you're saying is that the water is not going right into the top part of this garden. It's going, and there will be good drainage. So it's
So the plants are actually on the edge. So the plants are higher up than where the water is going. So
okay.
the stone is in the middle of the rain garden, and then the plants are a couple of inches taller than that.
Okay.
So they're not actually sitting in the water.
Okay.
Unless it is, I mean, there are occasions where they are sitting in the water. If it's an absolute torrential downpour, then they're sitting in there, but they very quickly dry out.
So that's kind of a tricky a tricky design, it sounds like, but that's to be discussed later. And I just have one more question. Would you present this project as our first project? Because I think a lot of people are hoping for some improvement in the intersection of 135 and 20 and Church. I mean, can it all be done at the same time? Can we?
Well, this is an engineering exercise. So like I said, the grants application is due in June, and then you sit and wait for 6 months. So usually you don't even hear until November, December timeframe. And then it's a year-long engineering activity. And then you apply for the next round of funding. So the same thing happens all over again. So you apply for the funding to construct. Typically you get the award in November, December timeframe. Then you do your RFP in order to get a contractor, and then you start construction the following spring. So this is really 3 years. So if there is interest in making like little improvements to like grass strips that currently exist, like that, if that's something that the garden club wants to take on, then absolutely be my guest. You know, this project wouldn't get off the ground for a couple of years, so there's ample time to do little projects here and there.
So those grass strips, I think are beyond what a garden club can do. That has to be, you know, soil, the junky soil has to be taken out, good soil put in. That's also, that's not something that a garden club can just tackle. But okay, thank you for your answers. I see there are other hands up.
Okay, I'm gonna keep track of hands. Okay, John, go ahead.
Lori, I just wanted to say, if you found a way to incorporate some of those images from Millbury about what was accomplished and what you accomplished there as part of the presentation when you're talking about our number one short-term priorities, I think that would be really effective, and more so than some of the generic examples that the consultant started with. So I was very impressed with the way that looks. They're relatively low-cost projects, and it ties your experience to it. So I really think it'd be very effective for you.
Unfortunately, it wasn't low cost. Each of those phases was over $2 million.
Okay.
All right, I agree.
Depends on your definition.
I agree with you, John. I think those are good visuals. So that's a good suggestion. We had to talk about that, Lori, about maybe working in a little bit of that into the presentation. Fran, go ahead.
Thank you. So I think anytime you can use trees and plants instead of impervious surface like the sea of pavement is a good idea. And so any of those, the pocket parks, the rain gardens, the lights, they would all be an improvement anywhere in our intersection of 135 Route 20 Church and Blake Street. So I would definitely be supportive of that. To Julianne's point, though, the one way was changed relatively recently. I want to say like in the last 20 years. And it's only one way up to 4 West Main Street, and the rest is 2-way. And that is where most people come in from Pier Street, because you can't make a left onto Blake Street cutting across Route 20. So you would force people to go down Pierce, down Hudson, up 20 to Blake Street for everything on that little area. And that might be a bit much, but it would have to be looked at.
Fran, the counter to that though is, from the very beginning of talking about downtown and how do you get more people to stop and shop and so on. And, we've already agreed we can't put more parking along Route 20, but it's not easy. But if you think about people pulling into Blake off of 20, finding a way into those new businesses, and then, you loop onto Pierce. Granted, it's not ideal, but there's been many towns that have incorporated bypasses to Main Street and created pockets around that. And that's what I visualize for Blake, Pierce, and, again, not a perfect scenario. You'd love to be able to come in from Hudson, for instance, or whatever. And you'd love to be able to turn into it from two directions from 20. But I think, I could visualize when 4 West Main is developed and you've got something there, then that's a destination for people coming in. Maybe you have to make it easier to get in there. It's a mess, but I think that would be a way to create that traffic flow, and as opposed to discouraging it. If you made Blake one way the other way, then no one's going to turn in there. I don't think.
Right. No, absolutely. The point was that I don't think it's as simple as just making it one way. I mean,
Sure.
You have to be able to get around, right? And there has to be traffic flow, and whoever are the traffic flow people would make the decision as to what works best.
Especially for those apartments too down there. Whatever works best for them getting in and out. Like if those people that live there had to go all the way around to Blake Street, I don't know. I mean, down to Main Street to get in. I don't know. But I guess
they're probably going to go where there's a light anyway. I mean, unless they know they're turning west on 20, then they're not coming down there. They're going back. They're going the opposite way. I would expect they probably come out on Hudson if they have to turn east, or they go out of town the other way. But anyway, this is a good discussion though. Just the whole visualization of better activity, parking. Yeah, I could totally visualize when Lori was talking about, just enhancing that and you pull in, you park, and that's the whole thing we were missing from some of our very earliest conversations. That how do you park and get to stores or shops in downtown?
Yeah, I think that anything we can do to improve Blake Street in any way sort of moves us down the road towards what I continue to see, the interconnection of 4 West Main Street and the existing fire station when it eventually becomes vacant.
Yep.
That area has got potential north of Route 20 kind of thing. And it's going to take, negotiations with private landowners and a lot of things to continue to develop that into some sort of a workable, pedestrian-friendly shopping/residential, district kind of thing. But to the extent that there are plans to continually beautify that area, if we did decide to do something either completely commercial or somewhat commercial with 4 West Main, and Blake Street is looking nicer and nicer behind that, it just sort of leads us down the road of eventually connecting to the fire station on the other end. So I think it just kind of sets the stage properly. Amy?
Yep. For some reason, I don't have the raise hand button. Some meetings I do and some meetings I don't. But my question was, if you how much would the engineering plan cost? Do you know? Is it like under 100,000?
No, so usually the design costs about 10% of whatever the construction costs are. So what I would suggest, and what I typically do when I apply for grants, is I would ask Weston and Sampson to come up with a concept plan. So work with them, discuss what you like, what we agree we want to see on Blake Street, and then have them develop like a rough concept. So then they would also provide a cost estimate for the engineering services So I anticipate it would, well, this is just Blake Street that we're talking about. So I would anticipate that it'd be somewhere around 100,000. So the design for that little pocket park would increase the costs because of course, you know, then you're involving the landscape architect and so that is I'd probably expect it to be somewhere between 100 and 150,000.
So for me, well, I have a question. For MVP, to get the MVP construction grant, do they also have to do the engineering part, the grant? Or say like, if we could get the money from town meeting and start the engineering quicker and then get the construction quicker, so it's only 2 years. So say we get on this year's town meeting for $100,000 to do the engineering part of it. And then the next year we can do the construction grant. Just to get it moving. I don't know, when I hear 3 years, and I don't know if town meeting would want to pay the 100,000, but I know we've wanted the downtown to move forward, so 3 years just sounds like so long. So I was wondering if we can get the engineering money quicker to get moving quicker, if we can still just go for the construction grant from MVP, or do you have to do both?
No, yeah, if you folks think that we would have a good shot at being able to secure the money through town meeting, then that's definitely the most efficient way to go. So I'd be happy to do it that way. Now, the one thing is that if we get the money at town meeting, so then of course we'd go out to bid right after town meeting, but we'd only have access to the money as of July 1st. So 6 months may not be enough time to complete the design, because not only would they have to do the full design, but they'd have to do the bid documents that go along with it. And then the grant application is still gonna, you know, it's always due in June. So if we started July 1, we wouldn't have to have the design 100% complete by the time the grant is due in June, but chances are it would be nearly complete. But we'd still have to wait at that point. So we filed a grant application in June of 2025. And then we would, if we get the money, I would apply for other grant money as well. And then we would need a town appropriation because there's always a match requirement. So we're still on that same time frame of actually being able to construct in, it would be spring of 2026.
Okay, so it wouldn't save any time really to go to town meeting?
Well, it could save a year.
It
It'd be
could
2
save a
years as
year.
opposed to 3
Oh,
years.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I guess I got lost. I'm always one for trying to move quicker, though. I think it would be great to save a year. Construction costs just keep going up anyway, so might as well save a year if we can.
Do you think the town meeting would be open to spending this kind of money on engineering?
Well, I'm wondering if this, we're getting there's a number of things going on here now. So our role as the MPIC was to basically move forward to the town a plan to do downtown revitalization, which we're going to do. To the extent that we can be helpful in making downtown revitalization happen, that's something we could also do. But I think it's got to be a decision of the select board as to if they want to bring this forward to the town. And the meeting we're going to do with the select board coming up is to basically present the plan and to talk about, we think, something the town ought to think about doing sooner than later is some of this infrastructure improvement and beautification. And by the way, the town planner has got some ideas about what might have to happen, but I don't think we're going to be able to at this meeting with the select board, present this whole idea and ask them for what they want to put on the warrant for town meeting about this. I mean, it might be possible after this meeting for Lori to have a discussion with the administrator about the committee. The MPIC is excited about this. You know, what would have to happen to talk about a warrant article tack for this authorization, and we as a committee could endorse it. But I mean, it's
What's the harm in asking? Though, Rick?
Beyond
Yeah.
our scope.
there's no harm in asking, but I don't think it's the purpose of the meeting. If we have it on January 18th, I don't think the purpose of that meeting is to discuss this particular project, as to just get the plan in front of the select board. Go ahead, Amy.
Well, if it's one of the major top priorities, what's the harm in asking the hypothetical that we could put that first phase before the town? You know,
I agree.
Why be bashful at this point?
I also think all the ARPA money hasn't been earmarked yet. So, I mean, I would ask them about town meeting, but I would also not hesitate to ask if you could have the 100,000 in ARPA money. Doesn't hurt to ask.
I have a quick question. So is it possible to, since you wanted the time frame to be done by June, excuse me, is it possible to use like college interns, like an internship to do that kind of design work? Because that you could get done, you know, pretty quick, February to May. And also on, as far as like the softscape landscaping ideas, could you use like landscapers in town and say, you know, put out like a bit, like we put out a bid for artists to come forward and show us their work, you know, like to do the doors or do the mural. Could you do the same kind of thing for the landscaping downtown and say, listen, we're looking for landscapers who might want free advertising. They can put their sign up and fix up some spots downtown. Is that possible?
I think that there are opportunities to involve students and, you know, landscapers to put up signs like, you know, an Adopt an Island campaign that a lot of communities, including Shrewsbury, has done very successfully. But this is a very complicated, heavily engineered plan. So it really has to be a top-notch professional engineering firm to design it, and, you know, landscape architects. I think using the students is good for ideas, you know, like maybe for concept, but you need a lot of experience in order to make it work. Like, we want to make sure that the rain gardens that are designed are actually going to function properly, that they're graded, the road is graded in such a way that the water is going to flow into the rain garden instead of bypassing it, or they don't have the professional expertise. And I'm speaking from experience because I was a grad student doing those types of projects. And I definitely didn't have the background when I was a grad student in order to be able to successfully design a project like this.
I just wanted to check just in case, just because the timing would sort of work. So I didn't know if like part of this could be, you know, dedicated, you know, kind of break it down a little bit further and say this part of the aesthetics could be done like this year based on this, I don't know, just kind of break it down smaller so something could be done. So to your point, you know, instead of waiting for 3 years to see this really nice photos that you showed us, you know, come into actually happen. So, okay.
Yeah, you know, I see this as kind of like the pilot project that will kind of kick off the balance of the downtown revitalization campaign. So it's really important for it to look great and people to really like it, right? Because then they're going to be hit up to fund future phases. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't work right or it doesn't look good, then the chance of being able to fund the rest of the downtown revitalization effort diminishes.
That's probably true.
Julianne, I mean, you're a representative on the select board. Is it your feeling that if we did a presentation that not only tried to present the plan, but also tried to present a fairly significant first phase project that we'd like to get funded sooner than later, and do that all in one select board meeting? Is that something that, first of all, you as a select board member would feel comfortable with? And how do you feel the rest of your peers on the select board would feel about sort of trying to do more than one thing at this meeting?
So I can only speak for myself, but you know, I think to your point, Rick, to get the select board to help us with the kind of general planning is, I think everybody's so anxious to see something happen that to present this project also is a real positive. But again, I'm only speaking for myself. I can't say how it all play out.
Well, that's good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe Julian, you and I and Lori next week ought to just put our heads together and sort of figure out, even before we talk to Weston Sampson, based on what we've heard tonight and the feedback we're getting from our committee, how we might want to structure this, and take some advice from you, Lori, as to how you think, if we wanted to do this, what could be presented, and how to sort of do this in a reasonable manner so we could get two things accomplished: to get the select board to nod their heads to say, okay, we understand the plan, we are going to start to take some steps to start to do things, and we really like the idea of this idea about Blake Street and getting started on that. So let's strategize about that a little bit next week. Maybe you could send us in. I know you're going to be back in the office Wednesday next week. Is that your plan?
Yes. Yeah, I'm taking Tuesday off, and we're closed tomorrow and Friday, Monday.
And Monday, right? Yeah, so maybe maybe if you could just think about it, before next week, if you just send Julianne and I an email with some availability you've got next week, maybe we could at least pick a time where the three of us could sort of put our heads together as to how we might want to do this. I'm excited about this also, but our first responsibility is to get the plan accepted. And our
Right.
second responsibility is to make something happen. And longer term, we have to decide, are we going to become the downtown management group? Or are we going to go back and reread the plan and excerpt other things from the plan that are important, the master plan, that we need to bring before the town? Or are we going to sort of focus our energy for the foreseeable future on managing downtown revitalization? We've spent all of our time for the past year doing it, but we are the master plan implementation committee, and the master plan talks about a lot of things besides downtown revitalization. So not to say we can't stay close to this, or we may decide eventually this downtown management group takes over responsibility for managing the change in the downtown. We don't have that group right now. We just have us. But we just need to keep thinking through what we want our role to be as we head into 2024.
I certainly hope the committee keeps a role of sponsoring ideas. There might be a time when this committee sponsors a grant or sponsors a CPA application, or and I get your point, but I think if we wash our hands of it, ideas will die. Right now there's no other group in town, there's no other committee in town that could take ownership of a specific activity. And so to the extent that we can, I'd like to keep active in that. And you're worried about focusing on downtown, and I get it, but everything else does somewhat overlap with the efforts that we're making here. There's tentacles from downtown to all the other parts of the master plan.
Yeah, I understand. Like I said, we just need to sort of keep in front of us the fact that we're the master plan implementation committee, and part of what was in the master plan, a big part, but part was downtown revitalization. There's a lot of other things in the master plan that at some point I'd like us to, sort of think what we think the next best thing is in the master plan we want to bring before the town. But I agree with John, until this thing gets launched a little bit more, we can stay close to it. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, should this project get off the ground? So what I did in Millbury is I recruited a focus group And the focus group consisted of some key staff as well as key representatives. Like, for example, in the downtown area is the library. So there was the librarian was on the committee. The DPW director was on the committee. The fire chief was on the committee because the fire station's right there. And then I had a traffic engineer, so he was a resident and served on the committee. I had 2 business owners who were located in the downtown, one of which agreed to have alterations made to his parking lot in exchange for participation in the program. So we wanted to make sure that he was on board with what was happening. So when we get to that point where we're talking about the actual design, you guys can choose whether you want to be involved or whether you want to step away. Maybe a couple of you who are particularly interested may want to be on this focus group, and then I'd bring other people in. Like, I think it would be really important to have Scott Charpentier. You know, maybe we'd have a representative from Mass DOT, since we're talking about Route 20 and, you know, the integration with the two. I'm not really sure at this point, but if you folks want to step away and not be involved in that aspect, then you will certainly be able to step away at that point. I'm just hoping that you will stay engaged, like John said, to help get me to the launch point.
Mhm.
You know, to kind of champion this effort, you know, at town meeting and with the select board, you know, just to try and get us to that point where we have a project.
Lori, I think you've done an amazing amount of work on this project, and I think all of us appreciate that you are invested and really trying to do what we all have been asking for. So I don't think it would be a hardship to be behind it. I do think it would be supported. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad that you like the possibilities.
Yeah.
I definitely think showing the Milbury pictures helped, because when I looked at the consultant's pictures, the big blocks, it was really hard for me to picture what Blake Street could eventually look like. But your pictures helped.
Mm.
I'll have to take some more pictures now that it's complete. So of course it still kind of looked like a mess because it was under construction. So for a presentation before the Board of Selectmen, I would take some finished photos so that they could see.
One other thing I'll add about the Milbury project is I'm very involved up at New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill.
Mm.
And we have something called a Community Greening Award. I'm on a committee that reviews municipal and private projects that do a good job of doing horticulture and greening and water management and all that kind of stuff. And last year, that Milbury project received a Community Greening Award from Tower Hill Botanic Garden. So
Nice.
that's something we could shoot for in the town of Northborough, is to be recognized by Tower Hill someday as a community greening location.
Something to aspire to.
You'd have to recuse yourself, Rick.
I'd have to recuse myself. Okay, this is a good discussion. Like I said, Lori and Julian and I will try and put some structure around this and decide how we roll this all together into this select board presentation. But I agree, anything we can do to move this kind of stuff forward sooner than later, we ought to be doing. And once again, speaking as the chair of the committee, I just want to make sure that we eventually continue to focus on the plan, the master plan itself in total, as opposed to one aspect of it. But I agree with the comments that we are the group of people that are interested in this right now. If anybody's going to push this forward, it's going to be us that's going to help to do it. So I'm not advocating that we step away to any extent at this point. So, okay, the other thing we wanted to talk about was the review, the joint meeting we had with the fire station building committee. I think that was December 14th. We had a good representation from our committee there. Plus Amy and Lisa Maselli were also representing the Design Review Committee. And then we had the members of the Fire Station Design Committee and the fire chief and their architects there. And I'll just sort of give my opinion, and then others who were there can give their opinion. I was impressed. I thought the architects had some good concepts in mind. They showed us pictures of the town of Northborough, not only as it looks now, but as it looked historically. They compared the fire station to buildings near it. They compared the fire station to buildings throughout the downtown. They compared the fire station to buildings other places in town. They showed us other fire stations. And it generally seemed that they were on the same wavelength that we're on, that this has to fit in nicely and that it does have to maintain some sort of a traditional historic feel. They talked about the fact that they thought that masonry and brick was the way to go with the building. We talked about landscaping. They had their landscape architect there. They haven't really developed a landscape architecture plan yet, but they understood that the beautification of the downtown was important. And to the extent that trees and plantings weren't going to get in the way of the fire trucks getting in and out of the building, that they understood they had to do something there, but they were limited by sight lines they had to allow to happen. We talked about parking. There are going to be 30 public parking spaces, new public parking spaces there. They're going to be on the westerly side of the building. We talked about, could they be on the easterly side of the building so they'd be closer to the common and downtown, but based on the layout of the building, they have to be on the westerly side. That means that people who would park at the fire station and go to a town event. We were talking about walking behind the fire station, having some sort of public access way behind the fire station, but the land slopes up fairly steeply. There's going to be a lot of earth moving and a retaining wall is going to have to be built. And so they talked about the best pedestrian path would be along Route 20 in front of the fire station. And then we talked about beautification of that sidewalk, some separation between the sidewalk and the street, things like Lori talked about tonight. So my sense was they're on the right path. The chief was thinking the right way. Obviously, the chief is mainly concerned about the functionality of the building, but he completely understood that it had to fit in nicely with the rest of the downtown. There's going to be a fairly tall tower they're going to hang hoses from, and they talked about how to make the top of that tower blend in more with some of the taller structures like church spires or something. The chief talked about maybe a clock in this hose tower kind of thing. That'll be the tallest part of the building that'll be visible from all over town, kind of thing like the church steeples are now. So no complete design was shown to us, but it just seemed like the way they were thinking seemed to make sense to me. And I've got a good feeling that one way or another, what they end up with is going to be reasonable for what we're talking about. And I think they'll include us to take a look at more complete designs as they make them, kind of thing. So that's kind of my takeaway. But other people, Amy, Julianne, some of the others were there. What was your feedback?
So first of all, Rick, I have to give you kudos for really making sure that they understood the importance of this building to our downtown revitalization. I think you mentioned it a couple of times, and I'm glad you drove that point home. But one of the things that I'm not clear about, and I did miss a little part of the meeting, is the wall. And if that wall, okay, so that wall is going to be almost 30 feet, which is about a 3-story building. And personally, I'm not an architect, I'm not a landscape architect, but I think if that wall is not made with material that complements the building or that is not very attractive, we're gonna lose something.
The wall Julian is talking about is the retaining wall that's going to be built behind the fire station to hold back, this hill they're going to cut into to get the thing flat for the fire station. Yeah, they didn't talk a whole lot about the design of that, except to say they thought it wouldn't be completely noticeable, but it would be noticeable. So that's something we'd have to keep an eye on.
That was my major concern too. When they first picked the spot a couple years ago, they estimated the elevations and slopes. And when this group came in, they realized it was way steeper than they had anticipated. So it's, yeah, 30 feet high wall. And one question I didn't ask is if they ever had to expand. I don't know if this fire station is built with a lot of extra room, but the chief did say the trucks get bigger every year. My concern was if they have to expand, you know, I hate for the town to have to build another fire station. So being being the person I am with my letter writing, I did write the chief a letter the next day and said, you know, shovels aren't in the ground yet. Did they ever look at the Harvey parcel? Because I felt like that should have been looked at, but years ago, because it had a, you know, you can get in from Hudson Street, you can get in from Main Street. If the town bought the Harvey parcel, you could have the Riverwalk. You could even put the new town hall there if we're going to use the other one for commercial. I just thought it offered a lot. But I did email that to the chief, and I didn't know if their architect could even just look at it. But he seemed to think we're too far down the road. But, you know, it just kind of stinks because I would hate for the town to pick a site with a 30-foot wall, and if they could, you know, to have to build another fire station in like 30, 40 years. Also this week with the rain, I was over on Monroe Street a couple times, and the water poured down Monroe Street all week, even like yesterday. So that whole street is icy. It was icy last night. I was out there.
At the bottom, it's icy.
Yeah, and even by the town common and the Video Bank, they've had to
Yep.
sand it all week, and it flooded down by Assabet Park. So all I could think of is the fire station. The water is just gonna pour over that wall, but they said they're gonna have to build swales and do some sort of water
Mitigation, yeah.
mitigation. Yeah, so it is kind of concerning. But I am glad that they're looking at brick and they're looking at the landscaping. Because I watched one of the first couple of meetings for the fire station building, and metal came up. I was like, oh no. But they're going to stick with brick.
Other comments? So we'll just have to say, I'll stay in touch with Dawn Rand. She's the chair of that committee from time to time, and see what they're thinking about, and see if there's some other opportunities for us as they get a more definitive design to be able to provide some input, you know, to that kind of thing. But I think they got the message, and I think they were already thinking that way, you know, anyway, based on the general comments we had. But I think the amount of work the architects went into understanding what the town looks like already was a helpful first step. Okay, I guess the last thing we have on the agenda tonight is we have the minutes from the last meeting. There were some changes made there. Lori distributed the amended minutes. Are there any other comments or questions about the amended minutes for the November 16th meeting? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes November 16th as amended?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you. Okay, get out my little sheet here so I don't forget anybody. Julianne,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Melly,
aye.
Ashley. You still with us?
No, Ashley and Tracy had to leave.
Okay. Fran,
Aye.
Gene Kennedy,
Aye.
Gene Cahill,
Aye.
Rick Leaf is aye. John Campbell,
Abstain, I was absent, sorry.
okay, Jen Tolman.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Any other business we need to discuss tonight that we have not brought up? Hearing none, let's keep January 18th open that could possibly be a joint meeting with the select board to talk about the plan, and as we discussed tonight, maybe also this Blake Street project and how to move forward on that. That's something that, as we discussed, Julianne and Lori and I will talk about next week. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second,
Okay, Julianne,
aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Gene Kennedy,
Aye.
Gene Cahill,
Aye.
Rick Lee votes aye, John Campbell,
Aye.
and Jen.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Hopefully we'll get together again on the 18th. Thanks a lot, folks.
Merry Christmas,
Aye.
everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.